I'm an application architect at Calendly. I've been with the company about 3 years. I specifically focus on Calendly's integrations, workflows, which is the in-product automation feature, and Calendly's public APIs. Currently, I am focused on Calendly's public API platform, although we have a lot of internal APIs. And Calendly public API platform is in its infancy, but we're trying to lay a solid foundation to kind of create it as a blueprint for adopting externally on a broader scale. About 18 months ago, we decided to build the next generation of an API platform. We had a limited set of APIs that our public customers could use, but we always knew this was not the final version. We needed a vision and a strategy, and once we got that, we started building the second version of our API that is more flexible, extensible, more future-looking. With that came some process changes and just some design principles that went into the API design. We're also transitioning internally from a monolithic to service-oriented architecture. So these guiding principles that we have established for our external API will in the future be applied to all our internal APIs too that are consumed by different parts of our system. We want to enable more automation use cases, automation and integration use cases by adding more capability in our API, but also we're investing in a better developer experience. We have things on our roadmap like building more SDKs, client libraries that developers could use to build their integrations faster, and also focusing on more self-serve experience, things that developers can do when they go to our developer portal, log in and manage their apps and credentials and all the assets associated with that. But we wanted to take the time to build a solid foundation before we get there. There's just a lot to building a mature API platform, and we're trying to do it right and not boil the ocean at once. Just the frustration with our own process, getting feedback from customers, and also consuming APIs ourselves. The principle of REST web APIs has existed for over a decade, but I think as an industry, we haven't really been equipped with the best tools and processes to build APIs that are robust, scalable, and a pleasure to consume. For instance, a common problem that you see often as a consumer is that the documentation is incomplete or out of date. The API is built as just a series of responses to very specific customer requests. And then you end up with this Frankenstein in the end that is very inconsistent, very use case driven, that is hard to maintain, to add to. Just observing our own experience internally and by consuming external APIs, we decided to change our approach. Use an analogy of with visual design, where when you build end user features on a typical cross-functional team, you have a designer UX person. They produce high fidelity mockups. We haven't really had the equivalent of that for APIs. You're really not setting yourself up for success by not having a proper design phase. The idea of an API change, of course, starts with product research based on customer feedback and our internal strategy. The team that builds the public API has a product manager that often defines an idea and discusses with the team. From there, we use Jira to manage our backlog like many companies do. We use GitHub for version control for both our implementation code and the OpenAPI specification where the API design is stored. Of course, use Stoplight as a tool to facilitate creation of the design document and the collaboration around it, because writing OpenAPI by hand is a little bit tedious. Stoplight helps there with Stoplight Studio, the visual editor, to write OpenAPI, but also Stoplight projects enable this collaboration for the review process. One team member can produce, say, a design for a new endpoint, and then before it's ever published on our documentation portal, another team member can preview these changes in a visual way, again, not just by looking at code, but by looking at generated documentation that Stoplight also offers. Once the review is done, someone presses merge and the new updated documentation is automatically published on the developer documentation hosted by Stoplight. A big assumption that is often made in transitioning from code first to design first is that you're already treating your API as a product. If you don't, that's really step zero. Your API should be a product. It should be treated just like your end user features. You need to solicit customer feedback, establish channels for the feedback, and have some kind of product strategy. You need to decide for yourself, what are you trying to accomplish for your API? How does having an API platform funnel into your business goals? And yeah, as I said, have some kind of strategy and roadmap, and design your API program by following the strategy and not just by responding to individual requests. So once you have that, I think it's easier to sell the design first approach because of the benefits that I mentioned. It leads to a higher quality implementation, consistency, governance, documentation that's never out of date. That's something that definitely speaks to developers both producing and consuming the API. Documentation that's never out of date and that's high quality, detailed, all your happy and unhappy paths documented, all that good stuff that you expect from a mature platform.